Hi, welcome to the breakout session, Partnering to Build Native American Community Conservation Delivery. Today's speakers will describe how they're using the NACD Technical Assistance Grant Awards to add additional conservation work on the ground in both Indian and non-Indian lands to find different ways to find benefits and outcomes. There's a range of speakers talking today, and while they're speaking, you can ask your questions in the chat box. They will be there actively answering questions while you're listening to the presentations. Our first presentation is going to be Larry Davis. Larry is the chair of NACD's Tribal Resource Policy Group and has served long-term as a supervisor on the State of Washington Whatcom Conservation District. Thank you, Larry, and sit back and enjoy the presentation.
Good morning or good afternoon, folks, depending on where you are. Welcome to this session. Let me begin by acknowledging the unexpected passing last month of Barry Hamilton. I'm sure many of you know Barry. He was the National Tribal Relations Liaison Officer for NRCS. Personally, I was just getting to know him, and I'm really sorry our paths did not cross earlier. So I just ask that we keep his memory and his contributions in our hearts. And for those who had a much closer relationship with him, family, friends, tribes and tribal members, and professional colleagues, they're probably particularly hurting. So let's keep them in mind as well. I also want to acknowledge that from wherever you are viewing this session, we are all situated on ancestral territory of the tribe or tribes that were the homes to the first peoples in that area. And for myself in Whatcom County, that's the Lummi Nation and the Nooksack Indian tribe. So it's time for to get the presentations going. And I'm going to turn it over now to Jeff Burwell. Jeff is the NACD's Southwest Region staff, but he also is staff to the Tribal RPG. So off to you, Jeff.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to give you a brief overview of NACD's Technical Assistance Grant Program. I want to give you a little background as to how this whole grant program started. So in 2016, the Natural Resources Conservation Service was experiencing significant staffing shortages, and they had a hiring freeze. That impacted their ability to get conservation on the ground and provide technical assistance to landowners. Now, NRCS had the funding to hire staffing, but they didn't have the capability. So to solve that issue, they entered into a cooperative agreement with the National Association of Conservation Districts to develop and implement a grant program that enhances conservation district technical assistance across the nation. So funds were awarded to districts to hire staff where additional capacity was needed to reduce those workload pressures. The State Conservation Partnership, which is usually the NRCS and the State Conservation Agency, as well as the State Association of Conservation Districts, prioritize those office locations within their state that needed that additional technical assistance help. So the technical assistance included conservation planning, design, layout, and certification of conservation practices for those producers with EQIP contracts and assistance with the Conservation Stewardship Program contracts. So what have we done so far? So we have actually had 3 grant cycles. Our first grant cycle was in 2018, and then we also implemented one in 2019 and just finished up 2020. So grants have been awarded to districts in every state, plus Guam, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico, with a total of about $34 million. So this has provided funding for staffing of 400 employees, either full-time or part-time positions, and which has really increased the technical capacity of those conservation districts across the landscape. And what have we done with the tribes? So far, we have also awarded grants to tribes across the country. In 2018, we awarded grants to INCA to provide technical assistance to 4 tribes in Montana and Wyoming. And in 2019, we awarded grants to 6 tribes throughout the West. and Connecticut. So it was Alaska, Connecticut, Kansas, Montana, and Washington. And then this past year, we awarded 6 grants to tribes in much of those same states, including New Mexico this year. And that was a total of 16 grants in 7 states for a little over $1 million. So this is providing the opportunity for those tribal conservation districts and organizations like INCA to increase the technical assistance capacity with tribal landowners. We're going to be continuing this program in 2021, and those existing grantees are going to have the capability of applying for grants prior to the RFP going out for new districts to apply. And Meg just sent out that announcement today, as a matter of fact. So look for that. And that's what I wanted to provide you with how the Technical Assistance Grant Program is working. And now I would like to introduce Delane, who is the Executive Director for INCA, and he's going to talk about the overview of the Technical Assistance Grant Program that they have.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the intro, Jeff Burwell, and also Larry Davis. My name is Delane Atcitty. I'm the Executive Director for Indian Nations Conservation Alliance. And I'd just like to do a short presentation about INCA, Indian Nation Conservation Alliance, and what we're doing with our projects. Like I said, my name is Delane Atcitty. This is a little bit of my background, 26 years experience in agriculture, natural resource management, ag business from Oklahoma Panhandle State, and master's in Kingsville, King Ranch Institute. Some of my past experience is the Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Nature Conservancy, and some various ranches and some of my consulting. They currently have me on the board of directors for Navajo Agricultural Product Industry. It's a 110,000 acre tribal farm. And then I'm currently on the board of directors for Society of Range Management, Holistic Management International, and then advisory board member for National Grazing Lands. Okay, our objective at Indian Nations Conservation Alliance is that we form a strong partnership with NACD over the last few years. And we also initiated conservation work with 5 tribal nations located in Montana, South Dakota, New Mexico. Our projects include farmer and rancher natural resource department meetings, formation of conservation boards, establishment of natural resource priority lists, and the creation of Indian Nation Conservation Youth Corps. And recently, NACD funding, we anticipate working with 13 more tribes throughout the United States, Alaska, to aid in tribal conservation district issues. Our team that's working exclusively with NACD funding are Heidi Brewer in the Northern Plains region, and Randall Black Eagle, Rocky Boy District Conservationist, Augusta Terkildsen, Oglala District Conservationist, Dr. Bill Dunn, Southwestern Regional Conservationist, Wallace Sosi, Navajo District Conservationist, Sadie Lister, Navajo District Conservationist, and also Leander, who's working with the New Mexico tribes. Our projects that we're looking forward to implementing in 2021 is to have a series of part-time positions to aid with tribal conservation district work, and then also to initiate 5 to 8 tribal youth conservation core projects, from biocontrol, rangeland assessments, reseeding, community gardening, GIS, GPS mapping, cultural guidance, irrigation planning, forest thinning, wildlife habitat restoration, and also ranch management issues. And then we also are aiding these conservation districts with facilitating strategic plans and also natural resource priority lists, which NRCS is eager to take over from there and start with some large scale projects. We also assist in conservation district capacity building, and then also assist with communication between tribal conservation district, tribal departments, state organization and federal agencies. Our goals for the next coming years is to establish and support tribal participation in the National Association of Conservation Districts, aid conservation districts, nurture our INCA Youth Corps to cultivate tomorrow's conservation leadership, and then also to promote collaborations for large-scale projects on our tribal nation lands. In conclusion, I'd like to send out a special thanks to the NACD team and also leadership for working with INCA to assist tribal nations and conservation issues. And at this time, I'd like to also thank Mr. Barry Hamilton for working with us and to, believing in INCA and getting some of these projects started that we're working on. Barry Hamilton left us all too soon. He was our NRCS tribal liaison that we work closely with, and just a special thank you. Okay, this last slide is my contact information. If anybody wants to discuss tribal conservation districts, feel free to give me a call or an email. And with that, I'd like to introduce Heidi Brewer, our Northern Plains District Conservationist. And her and I will be talking about our student youth program that we're calling the Indian Nation Conservation Alliance Youth Corps. Right now, Heidi Brewer and myself are going to present about our Indian Nation Conservation Youth Corps, specifically our Chippewa Cree Youth Corps. And the thinking behind this was last winter, we were trying to figure out, what's the best way to be more effective in starting these conservation districts with these tribal nations. And so we had some thoughts about, at that time we did have a youth corps, but it wasn't so much a boots on the ground, getting your hands dirty youth corps. And we really considered, the funding sources and what our ultimate goal was. And so we thought, well, if possible, let's get these youth training in natural resource management and give them a pretty broad perspective of some of the work that's out there and some of the work they're capable of doing. And, if they choose to make this a career, we'll be in support of that. And hopefully they get more experience and go on to a college or just go straight into the workforce and gain experience that way. Other thinking behind this was, a lot of our tribal nations, we have high unemployment rates of around 60% and higher. There's just a lack of jobs on our tribal nations. And for example, the Navajo Nation, which spans 17.5 million acres, there's 315,000 registered Navajo tribal members. And there's also, 285,000 of them living within the tribal boundary within the reservation border. So one of the statistics that the Navajo tribe has is that the average mean income is $9,200 a year per tribal member. So there is a need to, for employment and also to start some kind of, a better economy in our tribal nations. So putting that together, and then also thinking about the youth, we thought we want to work with youth 18 to 28 years old, and also try to focus on some of the youth that are at higher risk. And we're kicking around the idea, and we're like, well, the A and B students, usually they go on to community college and off to 4-year universities, or they start right at 4-year universities and they take off in their career. But then there's some other youth on our tribal reservations. They want to stay on the reservation. They want to work on the reservation, but they're not finding employment. So we thought, well, if we can try to cater to that demographic and focus on high-risk youth, maybe ones that are in risk of taking part in alcoholism or drug addiction, or even thoughts of suicide. So we kind of push this, we kind of mash this all together, and we came up with this Indian Nation Conservation Alliance. And we started off with, a fairly higher than average wage for the reservation. And the thinking behind that is that this is somewhat of a scholarship too. So when they do finish this six-week project, that they'll have a little bit of money in case they want to go on with school, to pay for college credits or do whatever they need to do to further their career. So that was the thinking behind this. And at the end of this presentation, I'll talk a little bit more about our goals and the future of this. So right now, I'd like to turn it over to Heidi Brewer.
Hello, everyone. As Delane said, the first pilot program for the INCA Youth Corps was done at the Chippewa Cree at the Chippewa Cree tribe, which is located in northern Montana. As Delane also talked a little bit about the overall goals of the program, but they were twofold. The first was to give youth work experience and life skills with getting boots on the ground, so to speak, doing locally important conservation work while receiving input from cultural leaders and elders. Secondly, was to increase awareness and participation in tribal conservation districts. As Delane talked about, the criteria was for high-risk youth between the ages of 18 to 28 who require a little more intervention and mentoring to achieve economic self-sufficiency. And this just shows an area where Rocky Boy Reservation, where the Chippewa Cree tribe resides in Montana. The focus of the program was to work with a higher than normal age range of students who tend to get left behind. INCA's goal through the program was to treat students fairly, give them a good wage, and provide much needed mentoring. The first thing that INCA had to do was to fill the vacated tribal district coordinator position for the Chippewa Cree Tribal Conservation District. In May of 2020, INCA hired Randall Black Eagle to not only serve as the tribal district coordinator, but to also be the overall leader and mentor for the Youth Corp crew. With guidance from the Montana Conservation Corps, Randall hit the ground running and began meeting with local high schools and the tribal college to find likely candidates to hire as crew members. The Montana Conservation Corps works to inspire young people through hands-on conservation service to be leaders, stewards of the land, and engaged citizens who improve their communities. 6 Youth Corps members were hired, a team leader, and 5 crew members. The crew members also received college credits, which were made available through Stone Child College, which is the local tribal college. The first week, the crew met in a classroom to take first aid training, finish their INCA personnel paperwork, and discuss what conservation meant to them at that point. At that point, all crew members did not really have a good answer as to what conservation meant to them. However, later on in the presentation, we'll provide some quotes of what conservation meant to those crew members when they finished the program. INCA also bought official crew shirts, and they were purchased so each member would be dressed alike, therefore providing them a sense of professionalism and belonging to a group. So we had shirts for the crew members themselves and the team leader. 40% of the work performed in the program was to help tribal cultural leaders and elders with ceremonial activities. Crew members were fortunate to have 3 community elders advise them on various cultural activities, as well as assist with the largest cultural event in the community, the Sundance Lodge. Discussion with the elders was invaluable to the crew members. A majority of the crew had never experienced the cultural aspect of the ceremonies. The crew assisted the Chippewa Cree Natural Resource and Forestry departments in collecting data on 38 range units that are managed by the Natural Resource Department. The data collected was used to create conservation plans for those units. In addition to creating conservation plans, the data collected will be used to complete the Agricultural Resource Management Plan, or the long-range plan, for all the agricultural resource uses on the reservation. The crew members learned how to complete GPS points on the units, and they found 4 spring developments. The mapping of the range units was estimated as a 3-year project and consisted of 5 major areas: fencing, livestock and wildlife management, agricultural and noxious weeds, spring developments, and water sources. Training included ArcGIS mapping, GPSing, partnering with federal agencies, and completing rangeland assessments. The pilot program began June 22nd and ended August 17th. At the end of the program, the crew members had natural resource work experience, a complete job application package, including their transcripts, a letter of reference signed by Delane, and a certificate of completion of the program. As I stated earlier in the presentation, at the beginning of the program, the crew members didn't really have a good meaning or any meaning of what conservation meant to them. However, these are some of the quotes that they had said. These are quotes from the crew members following the completion of the program. Conservation to me is the care and protection of the earth. We are connected to everything. Take one thing away and this earth will change. If we surrendered to Earth's intelligence, we could rise up rooted like trees. Conservation is conserving the land for future generations. Mother Nature provides everything we need to survive. Water is the main lifeline. We need clean water for all life. Everybody in our community will work and can make a big difference if we all work together and keep a positive mindset, because we need to have a healthy community for our kids, and their kids can have a happy life, to give them and others hope when they're having a tough time in life. To fund the pilot program, INCA refocused the NACD funding provided to the Chippewa Cree Tribal Conservation District in 2019. Those funds were used to purchase equipment. They paid for a rental of a vehicle to transport the crew members, and that funding also paid the wages for the crew members. The hope for the youth is that they will be part of the Tribal Conservation District in the future. These Youth Corps crew members have a good start in becoming local natural resource leaders who understand their tribal lands and their culture. This pilot program would not have been possible without this NACD funding. That funding builds a bridge between the tribes, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and NACD. And Delane will talk a little bit more about the goals of INCA's Youth Corps program in the future. He will discuss where those locations may be and the idea of what we'd like to see the Youth Corps expand into. Delane, if you'd like to go ahead.
All right, thank you, Heidi. Working with these tribal nations across the United States, where these tribal nations consist of approximately 95 million acres. And so some of the trends that we're seeing is, there's not a whole lot of tribal members or even tribal youth helping with any of these natural resource management. So that's what we're hoping to change that trend in the future. With this Youth Corps, this year we planted a seed, and we'll harvest it, years to come. So some of the other projects that these youth worked on this summer is we had them kind of do a report on we bought each one of them a San County Almanac by Aldo Leopold, and they kind of read through it when they had time, and they also reported it out to their troop leader, what they learned. So that was a little bit of side education as they were working on projects. One of the major accomplishments that I see is that they were active with cultural interactions with our tribal elders. That's one thing that I really wanted to push, besides professionalism with this Youth Corps, is that they hear it firsthand. And as you know, a lot of tribal, most of our tribes, we have a strong oral history that's passed down generation to generation. And for them to hear, how things were managed in the past, generations before, that's going to benefit them and stick with them. And hopefully they'll pass that down to future generations. And I think this is the start of it. This is something that that needs to happen. That this is something that you can't learn in a 2-year college or a 4-year college. This has to happen right there where you're being raised and where your heart is. And so I think this is a good start. And a lot of the federal agency liaisons that I talk to, they're really in support of this kind of management. The other big goal that we were trying to push on to these youth is the need for professionalism, and part of that is hiring them for a higher than normal wage for that area that they're in. And our hopes is that, like I said earlier, that they use it kind of like scholarship money, because we paid at the end of every month. And so they got a chance while they're out there in the field with their boots and sweating and thinking about what they're going to do when they get that money. They got some time to think about it, and hopefully they did put it to good use. We did also want to make sure that they had they had a job packet to take on with them in the future. And this job packet consists of a resume, a letter of reference from INCA, and then a certificate of completion. And I made sure I left my business card in there with them to let them know that they have access to my phone numbers at all times. And speaking of that, I had one of the youth call me at 3 a.m. One weekend, worried about if we're going to have this project for them next year. So I thought that he literally called me out for saying don't hesitate to call me at any time, and he did. So we had that discussion that as long as we have funding, we're gonna keep this going, but and also let them know that they have to do their part and get our deliverables done in the field, what we're working on. So our goals with this project is to to eventually have conservation districts established within these tribal nations in the future, and that they have a good rapport with NACD and lots of communication happening. That's one of our major goals. When we were starting this, we thought, well, a lot of, and this is a trend that you see of non-native conservation districts is, in any agriculture or farm meeting, most of the people that are interested are 60 years old and older. And so the same is that's exactly the same demographics that we're seeing on tribal nations. And, a lot of them are, they're set in their ways. They have their equipment already. They have their leases. They got their livestock. They got their farms, so we didn't find a whole lot of incentive for them to join, that, at that stage. So we thought, well, we better start addressing the youth and what, the future of their natural resource management. So that's one thing that that's one of our goals, is to, eventually get these conservation districts established. And also our next goal was to have these youth be the next source of natural resource managers, as they work their way up the career ladder, is that they come home to their tribal nation and either serve as a natural resource director, or maybe one of the employees in one of the departments like farming or ranching, or maybe they're on tribal council that understand natural resource issues. And what I was stressing to them is, if you're not invited to the table, bring your own table and start things on your own. So by that, I meant maybe they can become consultants and work on this 95 million acres that consists of, the tribal nation lands, AKA federal trust lands. So that was another one of our goals. And lastly, our goal is just to open up a means of communication between the tribes, the state organizations, the state agencies, and the federal agencies. Everybody has the best intentions for everyone in mind, and just having that open sense of communication, that was one of our goals, to get that established. In the future, we're this youth corps that we established in Rocky Boy, as Heidi was saying, it was structured for 6 weeks. And at that time, COVID hadn't really hit that area. It was starting to work its way, north up the nation. And, some of those isolated areas, they were the last to get hit. So we were trying to get our deliverables done and trying to keep everyone safe. And I think we fulfilled that. We did end the project with a couple offers that were given to us, and one was to work on tribal wildlife habitat project, and then another one was to work on a biocontrol with APHIS. So we landed an agreement to work with APHIS next year as one of our projects for the youth. This year, for one of our projects for the youth to work on a biocontrol project. And that should decrease our overall need for funding in that area. And I see this as a possibly being a sustainable project in the future, working with some of the federal agencies, getting their experience, this youth, and also expanding their knowledge. In the future, right now we're hoping to push for 5 youth corps this year, with Oglala, which Augusta will discuss in a few minutes, Rocky Boy, Jemez Pueblo, Arapaho, Cheyenne Arapaho in Oklahoma, and then also the White Mountain Apaches in Arizona. So those are our 5. Those are the 5 youth corps that we're going to focus on this coming year, with hopes to expand it, double it, or maybe triple it the next year. So in 2 years, I'm hoping that we can have a national INCA Youth Conference, either separate from our national conference or part of our national conference. And I'm hoping we can get federal agencies out there, state agencies, maybe to present and also recruit some of our Native youth. And then also we hope to get some colleges and universities throughout the nation that are interested in, getting some of our youth to go to school in their areas. So that's what we're shooting for a couple years. And, so far I've got nothing but good feedback for this project on both sides, the participants and also the tribes that are utilizing this source to get their deliverables done. And then also our funding sources, we heard a lot of good praise for this project. So we're going to go ahead and continue with it. We hope that it does make a difference in everybody's future. And we hope to expand it and eventually turn these into a national association of conservation district members. Okay, well, thank you for listening to our presentation. At this time, I'd like to turn it back over to Heidi Brewer so she can talk a little bit about what she's doing in the Northern Plains as a district conservationist. Thank you.
Well, hello again, everyone. I just am going to take a few minutes and explain what I've been working on just within the Northern Plains. You heard my job as a Northern Plains regional conservationist is to conduct work for INCA in the Northern Plains of the US. So as you just heard, have done quite a bit of work with the Chippewa Cree tribe, with the Youth Corps, and then Delane also mentioned the APHIS funding for biocontrol. Also have had discussions with the Northern Arapaho and the Shoshone tribes in Wyoming. INCA works with Oglala Sioux in South Dakota, and we did hire Augusta Terkildsen in May to fill the vacated tribal district conservationist position there at Oglala. Gusty has some great ideas, and she is hoping that she can have a youth corps at Oglala during the summer of 2021, and she has been working on those types of things to get one established. She will be up next to discuss what she has been working on and her hopes for Oglala. So at this time, I will turn the program over to Gusty, and she can expand more on what she is doing there at Oglala Sioux.
Ampetu washte, Augusta na Gusty na kayuzamaniwi imacha pikishto. Champe ma washte na pe chuza pikishto. Wambli hokbi elwati. Good day, everyone. My name is Augusta Terkildsen. I also go by Gusty, and I welcome you with a heartfelt handshake. I am from Eagle Nest District here on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, where I work for Indian Nations Conservation Alliance, or INCA, and I have been working for them since the end of May, the beginning of June, as the Oglala Sioux Tribe District Coordinator. So just a little bit of background about the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation and where I live. We have a land area of approximately 3,468 miles squared and service about 19,000 enrolled members who currently live on the reservation, but also our land services about 38,000 members that live offsite the reservation. We are located on the southern end of South Dakota. On the map, you can see it highlighted in red, and we also border the Nebraska northern border. So some really important land areas here on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation are the grasslands, badlands, forested areas, and sacred and historical sites. Our reservation also is home to 9 separate districts within the reservation. I am a part of the Eagle Nest District, and there are 8 others throughout, which are homes to which make their homes on these different areas on the reservation. Our land area includes large areas of grassland, and this is important because our land, the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, resides on one of the last 4 remaining grasslands within the world, which I will talk more later on with some of the research and work that I have been doing. But we are also home to the Badlands here in South Dakota, which kind of brings in some more complicated relationships with Badlands National Park, as well as the United States Air Force and the Ellsworth Air Force Base here in South Dakota, with some of the history of bombing ranges here, as well as the history which is deeply embedded into the earth here in the Badlands from the Cold War. Much of our area is also forested, which can be found in different districts, and there are different efforts here currently existing which cater to those forested areas. And last but not least, we also have sacred and historical sites. Some of these sacred sites here for Lakota people are Ghost Canyon, Snake Butte, Eagle Nest Butte, and there's many more, but those are just some of the ones that are located in my district. We're also famously known for the sad Wounded Knee massacre that happened here. And so these are also some of the areas that we have to include when we're discussing conservation. So a lot of my work has gone into research and identifying what conservation looks like for Lakota people. And a lot of this goes into specifically identifying specific conservation needs that Lakota people need or want in a conservation district, as well as basing it off of traditional ecological knowledge and incorporating a lot of traditional ecological knowledge and making sure that the community is still involved in their access to nature and ceremony are not limited by conservation. So tribal conservation here on Pine Ridge is going to be different, needs to be different and cater to a lot of the tribal needs and the culture, which differs from a traditional conservation district that is located off of tribal lands. So some of the traditional ecological knowledge that I am trying to incorporate is replanting and specific harvesting methods that need to be incorporated into conservation to kind of keep Lakota people's connection to the area, as well as making sure that those culturally significant plants and animals continue to exist for the futures to come. Also, I have done lots of consultation, as much as I could have done in a pandemic, which I will admit has been limited, but have done lots of consultation with certain individuals and already existing organizations and groups which have been doing conservation work here, such as the South Unit Working Group, which specifically pertains to the South Unit, which is a Badlands area. So they deal with the bombing range, bison restoration, as well as kind of dealing with the complicated relationship with Badlands National Park and who controls certain lands, as well as I've been listening in on a lot of their meetings, especially there's a lot of potential there for future partnership and work with conservation, specifically relating to specific land identification. And they're doing a lot of research with an individual from one of the universities here in South Dakota that is doing the history of land allotment in that area. Another partner is also Muscogee Agriculture, which specifically relates to the agriculture needed here on the reservation, such as sustainable poultry farming, as well as specifics in that, which relates to the individuals here in their agricultural endeavors. The other organization that I have identified and been in contact with is Trees, Water, and People, which is a nonprofit that reforests and plants trees here on the reservation. So there's a lot of potential for continued work and partnership with some of these areas. I've been reaching out and trying to get in on their meetings and doing listening sessions with their individuals and some of the communities and districts that they represent. The South Unit Working Group is unique in its own sense, as it brings in individuals from every single district here on the reservation to get reservation-wide a reservation-wide ideal on what conservation does look like for that area. I have also done a lot of meetings and listening sessions with previous tribal leaders here, and as previous tribal leaders, and such as Trudy Ecafee and Ruth Brown, which have done some conservation here and had a lot of ideals, which they have shared with me. So continuing on with a lot of my work has been centered around research. So I've been doing specific research and case study on conservation district in Indigenous areas, as well as doing case studies on conservation efforts globally, or specifically related to North America and the Americas here, and what worked, what didn't work, what are some certain like data taking methods, as well as community consultation. I have also done a lot of specific tribal conservation and taken in a lot of ideas from my listening sessions. One of the more interesting and important that, was brought to my attention was the need to replant and reseed a lot of culturally significant plants, because they're, those plants are identified as charismatic for our people because they are culturally relevant, such as hundreds of trees may be taken every year to build powwow and ceremonial arbors, as well as sage, which is used in ceremony. So making sure that I'm keeping those ideas and the voices of the people in our conservation efforts here with INCA and in my work. I've also done a lot of research on grazing, especially here on the grassland. As I mentioned earlier, the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation and the Northern Great Plains are one of the last remaining grasslands in the world, and that's going to be important for the future with climate change response. I've also been doing a lot of research for our neighboring reservation here, which is the Rosebud Indian Reservation. They have a grazing ordinance there in which we can possibly model and implement here on Oglala Sioux tribe, as well as they also have the tribal land enterprise, which allows them to kind of buy back land and making sure that they can grow their land size, which is really interesting and very, out of the box thinking, which I think maybe for in the future work with INCA conservation and for our tribe, we can kind of model something after that. I've also done my own personal research on rotational grazing and was actually out in the field. The picture on the right is some of this work where I actually did some research on a rotationally grazed plot versus a non-rotationally grazed plot, and, to conserve biodiversity here on the reservation in certain land plots. And there's a lot of peer-reviewed resources, as well as research supported by my results supported by my research, that rotational grazing contributes to a more evenly distributed plant community, which then leads to greater biodiversity for birds and pollinators and greater food sources for wildlife here. Another thing that I have done is I've done identification of important and charismatic species here. Another thing that I would like to bring up and support, and another thing that fuels my work, is that 80% of the world's biodiversity resides on indigenously controlled lands. And so our tribal lands, our reservations, are seen as sanctuaries for a vast amount of biodiversity, and we need to continue to settle for that. And so we need to continue protecting our lands for the future of our children, but also for the future of wildlife and plant species generations. My research has also led me into educational opportunities, and this leads me into the INCA Youth Corp, which is modeled after the Rocky Boys Youth Corps in 2020. And I have done some consultation with Randall Black Eagle here at INCA, and I also have a lot of experience working with youth in other jobs and other senses. So with our INCA deliverables is just trying to get youth involved into conservation, provide professional development, and do a high impact conservation related project. And so the overview of our program is that we're introducing conservation with an introduction to the field, This will include like first aid and literally just working in the field, getting the youth out under the sun. And the professional development aspect will include resume and cover letter development, as Delane mentioned earlier. We'll also do letters of references at the end. I'm also working with our local tribal college, Oglala Lakota College, or OLC, to get this accredited as a field science course, or just so that the youth have that under their belt. And we're also targeting specific youth. So as I stated before, with our professional development, we really want to include some financial literacy, introduction to writing a resume, having a cover letter so that they can take the accumulated experience that they get from the Youth Corps and apply it for, future jobs, for future research projects, or even for applying for college. I'd also like to get the project accredited through the local college so that they can continue on with their education here, or they can use it on their resume, so that they can get into other organizations and have a better potential for being hired. So we specifically want to target some of our youth who face the hardships of living on the reservation, or their families may not be able to support them, or where their families aren't able to support them in their future or for school and things like this. So we're specifically, I did some research on how to get to those target youth, and we'll be going through some of the school counselors, and that'll be me talking one-on-one with some of the youth counselors, as well as doing informational sessions for these youth. And then hopefully we can get a good amount of applicants to apply, and then go on with the acceptance process. The intro into the field, I really want to get youth in there, really want them to get out into the field, be able to do plat vegetation, grazing assessments, learning how to just field safety 101. We want to incorporate wilderness first aid into our program, but as well as providing a cultural connection. And that's one of the biggest goals of our youth program, is to get these youth connected, not only with the nature where they live, but also giving them the knowledge, the history, and then as well as providing that cultural connection and outlet where, they are able to go to this person that we are able to hire for, doing a sweat lodge ceremony, or just reaching out for guidance and consultants with spiritual peoples. The picture on the right is taken from Generation Indigenous Ways, which is a youth program here, or Generation Indigenous Ways is a nonprofit which specifically teaches youth science and traditional ecological knowledge through cultural connections. So here you can see them making a bow. I've done a lot of work with them and would like to continue to include them in the future, especially with INCA here on Oglala Sioux tribe. So some of my future work for INCA is continuing with the youth project. Hopefully I can start with recruitment here very soon in the next upcoming months of February and March. Continuing to chime in on different listening sessions with the different partner organizations that are already doing conservation efforts, as well as scheduling meetings and discussing and having conversations with the new tribal leadership that was just recently elected here on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And that is all that I have for you. I thank you for your time and for listening.
XJ, hello. My name is Patricia Killian. I'm the Administrative Officer for the Muscogee Creek Nation Natural Resource Conservation District. Well, Miss Doggy, Amigana, Jahi Jalgi, helping our people protect our land. Just a little history. The Creek Nation Conservation District was established within our Tribal Department of Interior as a self-governing commission to represent and protect the interest of both our tribally and individually held Indian lands. Our mission is to maximize the utilization of the USDA programs, increase opportunities for our landowners, and provide some leadership to our landowners. The Muscogee Creek Nation boundaries covers all or part of 11 counties. It's a large area, and with such a small staff, we have ran into some issues trying to provide information and outreach to all of the areas. The challenges we faced with some of the lands is there's multiple landowners on fractionated land. Not all family members have the same idea for this land, and the tradition of farming probably was lost with their grandparents and great-grandparents. The issue of capital and lack of farming history. What we are trying to do, we have established several demonstration farms so that we could provide a visual for our landowners to see how their land might look through improvement through brush management or other practices. We've established field days, we've provided ideas and funding sources as well as technical knowledge to our landowners. This was one of the demonstration farms. As you can see, this was a pecan orchard. And as you can see the difference once we did the brush management on this property. Other things we're doing, we are working in conjunction with state and federal partners, other tribal tribes and other Creek Nation tribal departments to provide conservation projects to our citizens. With the National Association of Conservation District Technical Assistance Grant, this helped us to provide additional staff to help improve services and reduce the workload. As I mentioned earlier, because of the large boundary area that we have, the staff will help us provide programs in each one of these areas. Before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we had established our first outreach meeting in one of the counties, and our intentions was to provide this in each one of the 11 counties. We got the first one started, and then we also had a grant from the USDA NRCS office for a community garden. So we established this community garden at our elderly housing area and partnered with our reintegration department and our environmental department who help us to establish the plants and actually build the planters and put them up at the elderly housing. This is just more pictures of the garden once it was established. And then we were also able to go out and to visit some of our citizens who had established a garden, at their home, whether it be a small container garden in the back to a raised bed or a full-blown garden area. Now I'd like to turn it over to Tatum Nelson, who is our Conservation Outreach Coordinator, to present on the next subject.
Thank you, Patricia. Like she said, my name is Tatum Nelson, and I'm the Conservation Outreach Coordinator. Unfortunately, because of COVID-19, we had to come up with new ways of reaching our citizens. We wanted to find a way to engage our publics while providing them with information in a fun and interactive way. This is where the idea of tailgate talks was formed. It was an idea started by our coworker, Julie Norum, and her daughter, Natalie, who led us in our very first episode, which I will show you now.
Hi, I'm Julie Norm, and I'm with the Muscogee Creek Nation Conservation District. I'd like to welcome you to the first edition of Tailgate Talk. Today, I'm here with my daughter, Natalie Norm. Hi. And she's going to talk to us about how to make indoor seed starters. Go ahead, Natalie.
So first you want to take a toilet paper roll or a paper towel roll that you cut so it's Next, take your toilet paper roll and fold it this way and this way. Next, you shove a box or a square.
That was just a short clip that I wanted to show you of the first tailgate talk that we participated in. These tailgate talks allow us to cover a variety of topics concerning conservation, our department, and the culture of the Muscogee Creek Nation. We had guest speakers, and we plan to have more so that we can engage wider demographics and all generations. I'm going to go ahead and start another video, and this one is about our youth and teaching them about our enviroscape. So we had a speaker from the Environmental Services Department show us how to identify animal tracks. And we had Creek Elder Pearl Thomas, who taught us some words in the Muscogee language. And then Jennifer came back to teach some of our youth about the enviroscape and how we can protect our land. So I will show you that now. Thank you for joining us for Tailgate Talks. My name is Tatum Nelson, and I am the Conservation Outreach Coordinator for Muscogee Creek Nation's Conservation District. Today, I'm here with Aaliyah, Gunnar, and Natalie, and we will be learning from our friend Jennifer from Environmental Services about the enviroscape. And Creek Elder Pearl Thomas will be talking to us about certain words in the Creek language.
I'm Jennifer Ryer with Muscogee Creek Nation Office of Environmental Services, and I'm here with three friends today to talk about ways to protect our land, different hazards that we are going to face every day that, you know, we need to make sure and make the safe choice, and different ways to mitigate the different hazards that can impact our environmental health and also the health of our friends and families. So we're going to start over here today at our house. So Gunnar, do you mind going and standing by Aaliyah? We're going to compare your water. It's okay since you guys are siblings, right? Mm-hmm. All right. So why do you think that Aaliyah's looks clearer than your son's, Gunnar? You guys have any ideas? What happened over here where Gunnar was monitoring his water?
There were different things, trash and all that.
That's so true. So the part that didn't have any of the hazardous waste events, they have clean water, and poor Gunnar, his drinking water is not looking great. But it's important that we have those wells, right? And so that helps us filter the water and clean it. But we want to be good stewards of the land and make sure that we do our part so that our friends and family and neighbors have clean water to drink, right? Okay, you guys did a phenomenal job. I appreciate all your help today.
I just wanted to show you guys that clip because it shows what we are trying to do here. We're trying to engage all types of generations, from young kids to our Creek elders. And we want to offer up these services and these programs for our citizens so that they can engage in what we are doing, and we can help them by giving them more information. And the next video I'm going to show you has Creek citizen Josh Emerson, and he's explaining how the USDA programs have helped his cow-calf operation in Renniesville, Oklahoma. So let me get that started for you.
I'm Josh Emerson. I live in Chakotah, Oklahoma. I farm and ranch near Renniesville around the Honey Springs battlefield area. We ranch on about 1,200 acres. The majority of that we own and the rest is leased. We're primarily a cow-calf operation. We do have some stockers. We retain ownership in some of our calves, and we bale our own hay, and we sell some hay. I'm a Muscogee Creek citizen. My grandfather has been here since my family has been here since before statehood. He had started a farm south of Lakota, and I got to go to it some when I was a kid. And my father had also had cattle and farmed. And from a young age, I knew that's what I was going to do. FSA, I started out with FSA and their Young Beginning Farmer Program, and that helped me purchase my first piece of property at the low interest rate and no down. I mean, that was really the only way a young person could get involved in agriculture then. It really helped me get started. I've grown my operation. The first 160 acres I bought, we have grown that to over 700 that we own now. And it wouldn't have been possible without USDA and FSA programs. CSPs helped me improve my property by giving me some funding that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. It's helped me take better care of my property.
So I'm going to give you a brief overview of some of the other tailgate talks that we've done, and then close out by showing you one last video. So we were lucky to talk with Josh Emerson, and we were also lucky to talk to Truett Eubank at the College of the Muscogee Nation about his programming and the updates that they are doing there. We also made a video because we wanted to make sure the community knew about the services that our department provides. So we made a video demonstrating how to extract a soil sample for testing and why that is so important. We were able to highlight our work at Deep Fork National Wildlife Refuge and engage in a plant ID there with one of our coworkers in the Environmental Services Department. And that is a video that I'm going to show you a clip of now.
Today, we are at Deep Fork National Wildlife Refuge, where 1 year ago, we partnered with the staff to plant over 500 native plants. We would like to thank the Sioux Butterfly Farm for donating the plants, as well as the 4-H programs from Henrietta and Preston. Last year, when we came, we planted, like she said, over 500 plants. The Sioux Butterfly Farm was very generous to provide all those plants and the tools to plant them, and we had many volunteers along with the Deep Fork National Wildlife Refuge staff that helped with this project, and we're just revisiting it today. We have Christy Lawson from Environmental Services joining us to answer some questions about pollinators and what we have planted in this garden. Christy, can you tell us what are pollinators?
Yeah, pollinators are any type of insects that pollinate plants, like butterflies, bats, beetles, bees. Monarch butterflies are a big one that we have seen declining numbers in their populations. And we are today here seeing one of our projects that we did to help restore populations here in Oklahoma for monarch butterflies.
We have been incredibly lucky to be able to partner with other organizations and other departments within the Muscogee Creek Nation. And we were also able to have a Facebook Live event for our Plant ID Field Day, where we had people come out to listen to Blaine Stacy from the Oklahoma Conservation Commission. And it was a great turnout, and we have had great success with our tailgate talks as well online. We've had a lot of community engagement, and we are excited to continue this throughout 2021. We're looking forward to doing more of these videos to engage our citizens and hopefully gain feedback so that we know what they are needing and we can help them with whatever they contact us about. I just want to thank you again for joining us and listening to us talk about our presentation and our tailgate talks. And I'm very thankful for all that you are doing. So now I'm going to turn it over to Bill Dunn.
Hello, my name is Bill Dunn. I'm the Southwest Regional Conservationist for Indian Nations Conservation Alliance. I'd like to speak to you today about delivering conservation to the Navajo Nation. Indian Nations Conservation Alliance was formed as a 501c3 in 2002 to encourage Native American tribes and Alaska Native communities to form tribal conservation districts and implement projects to improve agriculture and conserve natural resources. Today, I'd like to provide you an overview of the unique challenges that face us in working with the Navajo Nation and why we're optimistic about the future. The Arizona Association of Conservation Districts, which is a member of NACD, formed 5 conservation districts on the Navajo Nation in the 1980s. Indian Nations Conservation Alliance dedicated 2 staff who are members of the Navajo Nation to help these conservation districts make things happen. With NACD funding, we're going to add 5 part-time interns in the near future. To date, efforts at range and livestock management have been yielded limited success, but we're refocusing our efforts to increase progress, and we're optimistic about the future. Let's begin with a little bit of an overview of the Navajo Nation. The first thing to know is the population is large, really large. There's 330,000 members of the tribe, 175,000 of which live on the reservation. Those 330,000 members represent 11% of all Native peoples in the United States. The reservation is divided into 5 Bureau of Indian Affairs agencies shown by the different colors on this graphic. And within those are 110 chapters, which are analogous to municipalities on non-native lands. So the 5 agencies are overseen by the Bureau of Indian Affairs Navajo Regional Office. So it's the only tribe in the United States that has a regional office dedicated solely to its Indian trust lands. The 110 chapters send 1 delegate each to Window Rock, Arizona, which is the capital of the Navajo Nation, and they represent the council that governs the nation as a whole. The next thing to note is that the land mass is big. In fact, it's 27,000 square miles, which is slightly larger than the entire state of West Virginia. That is important because it represents over 1/3 of all native lands in the United States. So it's a large area, but the next thing to notice is incredibly dry. And so the productivity is modest at best. Average precipitation goes from 8 to 15 inches of precipitation a year. Drought is a normal part of the environmental scenario and climate scenario there. In fact, drought occurred in 60% of the 115 years that stretched from 1893 to 2009. And within those years, droughts of 5 years were not an unusual event. So, given this, most of the nation is covered by a shrub-scrub vegetation type, circled at the lower left of the slide. It's a semi-arid grass and shrub mix. Although grazing pressure over the last 100 years has shifted the mix more to shrub and less to grass. Most of the range is far, far from reaching its productive potential at this time. Management has been and continues to be complicated on Navajo Nation lands. This can be anchored with the stock reduction efforts of the 1930s, which serve as an appropriate anchor for issues that continue to surround range management to this day. During that time, a burgeoning sheep population well above carrying capacity and severe drought of the Dust Bowls combined to produce the worst range conditions in the country. John Collier, who was Commissioner of Indian Affairs under Franklin Roosevelt, initiated a program to reduce sheep herds by half. And one thing to keep in mind, sheep are a very valuable commodity to the Navajo people from time immemorial. The tribe resisted the reduction for several years until the government officials showed up and forcibly removed sheep, and in some cases killed them within 100 yards of the homes of their owners. Bitterness rooted in this reduction campaign remains to this day and can feed suspicion of any government-funded initiatives. A larger issue facing us is that of solving the problem of customary use. There's no defined allotment for grazing on the reservation. Instead, there are customary use areas, which are swaths of land that have been used by families for generations. That system worked well when the tribe was small and the land available for each family to graze was ample. The difficulty began when the land was passed on to generations, such as to 4 siblings in this example, shown by the 4 squares. And then they began to marry with other families. And so joint usage became split between 2 families per offspring, as shown by the squares that are showing up on your screen. The situation ends up with everybody owning the land, which means no one owns the land. And so it has devolved into a scenario where everyone is grazing on open range with intermixing of herds, little or no management of numbers or grazing pressure. Supplemental feeding becomes required to make it through the year, and profits are slim to non-existent. So what's the answer? Can this situation be solved? We think it can. First thing to note is that Navajo producers, most if not all of them, are not satisfied with the current situation, would like to see things improve. Indeed, it's not uncommon to go to a meeting and hear stories of dismay from those dissatisfied people wondering why the land can't support their cattle anymore. And I think the second answer is contrary to the large scale of the Navajo Nation, is that we should go small. We shouldn't try to solve all the problems for all the people at once. Instead, find those customary use areas with ranchers and producers that agree on the need to change and combine them as one group. An important part of this focus will be on the health of the land. In other words, taking care of creation, an essential value of Navajo culture, and shifting focus from total income to increased sale price of individual animals. In other words, healthier animals. Again, addressing the value of creation to the Navajo culture. If we can do this, word gets around the tight-knit communities of chapters really quickly. And soon enough, there'll be other people that will come to us asking for help with their situations. And we hope over time, this will snowball into major changes across the reservation. Well, thank you for your attention today. And I hope we found this presentation helpful.
Well, all that was fascinating. What a great group of speakers, giving you really just a taste of all the work that they're doing. I want to remind you that if you have any questions that haven't been answered, they will get to them in the chat. And as you leave this presentation, go back to the agenda and look for what you want to do for your next presentation. Thank you for joining us today.